Welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe. I'm an advisor, author, and general explorer of the service and experience space. My guests tend to have just released some interesting research. They run a company that has some interesting tech in the service and experience space. They are part of an organization that is doing some cool stuff, or they run their own business doing interesting things for both their customers and or their employees. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I don't know if it's can describe as an old friend of the podcast. I don't know. Anyway, it's kind of Don Schuerman. He's back on the podcast. It's almost like he's a perennial shower-upper on the podcast. Don, welcome back to the podcast.
It is great to be back here. You know, as I was saying, I think people who get to, Saturday Night Live has like a 5-timers club for people who've been on the show more than 5 times. Like I feel like you need a similar kind of, award and celebration. Get all of us together and have a panel discussion.
Well, I think that's probably a great idea. I mean, because I was thinking about kind of like, do I need to ask you this question anymore? Because as I say, you've been a perennial guest on the podcast for the last few years. Because I went back and I checked the records, and this will be number 7. Now, I know we think there needs to probably be a badge or a trophy or something that goes with this. But because I don't make any assumptions about regular listeners or newbies or everything else, I always ask people to give me a thumbnail sketch on who they are and what they do. So, Don, break out the intro, sir.
Sure. So I'm CTO at Pega Systems. So if you don't know Pega, we're an enterprise software company, and we describe what we do as an enterprise AI decisioning and workflow automation platform. So large enterprises use Pega to improve the decisions they make and the workflows that they drive in terms of how they engage their customers, in terms of how they automate the various servicing that they do from onboarding all the way through servicing their customers, and the way in which they run their core operations of their business so that they're operating both efficiently, but also adhering to things like regulatory compliance.
Okay, perfect. Now, by the time this podcast comes out, we'll be just over a month away from Pega World, which is taking place at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas from June the 9th to the 11th. Now, I'm going to be there, so we'll get a chance to rummage around all this sort of stuff in person. But Don, 2 questions. What can we expect this year? And will you be busting out the famous silver bomber jacket this year?
So I'm sure the silver bomber jacket will make an appearance.
Yay!
Yeah. What I've learned though is the silver bomber jacket can get a little warm in Las Vegas, so it has to be selectively deployed. But in terms of the conference itself, I obviously we're going to talk about AI and the impact of AI on industry, on client experience and customer experience, on automation. But my hope is to do it in a real pragmatic and BS-free kind of way.
Okay.
Right. And I think we're at this point in the hype cycle around AI that it's time to start having real pragmatic conversations about how we can use this for real, where the real value drivers are. Because, I think obviously we will find our bit of trough of disillusionment, as Gartner sort of describes periods of the hype cycle. But I do think we are at the beginning of what's going to be a pretty profound change in business and technology. And I wouldn't be surprised if in 3-4 years we look back and feel like this was as impactful, say, as the internet in terms of what it's done to our customer experiences and our workplaces and frankly, even our lives.
Okay. I mean, yeah, no, I think so. I mean, we're sort of I don't know if we're at the peak, top of the hype cycle, or we're kind of reaching kind of hype squared or something. Who knows? It's like everything and everybody is talking about it. But, in amongst all that talk, and you alluded to it around this trying to take a no BS approach to it, because there's something that's steeped in it. And no disrespect, you've been around the block a few times, as have I. I mean, what's your general view of the landscape and the enterprise world? I mean, and what are you seeing that is good and bad about the offerings that are currently out there?
So I think, we're at an interesting time. And I think that as I look at what's happening, for example, with Gen AI, it's quickly becoming apparent to me that there's a set of capabilities that are going to frankly become kind of table stakes, part of the game, right? So, having the ability of Gen AI to summarize something for you, whether it's an email or a customer interaction history in a contact center or an operations case that somebody may be working on or a document. I think that's going to be at our fingertips in most any tool we have, whether it's, CRM tools, Pega, our office tools, etc. And I think that, it's important to understand that, because I think those will be productivity enhancers, but they're not going to necessarily be differentiating either for vendors like Pega who are trying to stand out in the marketplace, nor frankly for organizations and enterprises themselves, right? Because I think every enterprise is going to have access to the same sets of capabilities.
Right.
What I think is interesting is watching where the opportunity for this stuff to drive true innovation and create opportunities for enterprises to potentially separate themselves in terms of the experience that they can provide, in terms of the way in which they run their business and the speed in which they're able to respond. And that, to me, that emerging set of, hey, look, here are the places where not only can I use Gen AI to kind of tweak productivity around the edges, which is valuable and we should all do it, but where can I actually pull it and infuse it right into the center of my business and to change the way I actually think about things like customer experience and innovation and pace of change.
Right. And I mean, given all of that, because I think you're right, there's a lot of stuff that where the summarization and that those productivity type of developments are, as you say, will quickly become sort of table stakes. There's a lot of talk about that and about people saying, oh, this is going to revolutionize this and revolutionize that. But there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, it seems, in all that sort of as well. I mean, and so what should people be doing to be able to tell the difference between kind of what's real and what's going to hit the ground and be able to deliver for them kind of quickly and, if you like, stay true to its promise? Or against all those kind of there's other ones which might be a little bit more smoke and mirror and all promise and no delivery.
Yeah, I think there is no shortcut to getting and going actually under the hood with some of this stuff, right? And I think that there is increasingly a demand that people don't take kind of vendor market hype, whatever, at face value, but actually dig in and use it and try it and experiment with it inside of their own businesses. And that's true for generative AI tools. That's true for technology across the board. But I think the importance of doing your homework and getting a little bit of an education in some of this stuff has never been more clear, because the technology world is moving so fast. You've got to actually have some degree of understanding in order to keep up.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there is this big. It's almost like a change management of yourself, not just of the organization. You've got to kind of educate yourself and keep yourself kind of up to speed. And that doesn't mean say you need to be technically versed or skilled in an area, but you have to be able to understand what it's trying to do and and what you need to do in order to actually access the potential. Let's say,
yeah, and you have to have done enough to have an opinion. And the nice thing about Gen AI is there's you don't need a sophisticated coding environment or coding background to go play with this stuff. And most organizations are actually figuring out that it's relatively easy and straightforward to stand up a Gen AI environment that is secured, that is protective of data, that runs inside of an enterprise's own sets of walls and guardrails, but provides a place for employees to go in and actually try their own prompts, ask their own questions, see how they can actually use it. And I think that's true for leaders as well. I think if you're not using this stuff, if it's all just a theoretical conversation, you're never going to be able to actually get to the level of detail you need in order to find where the real value is.
Yeah, no, sure. But I think the thing you also said in there when we were talking in the setup of this podcast, you said kind of like in reality, it's the boring use of AI that really will help enterprises work smarter and harder. And that reminded me of something that I wrote back at the end of 2017. There was a piece called "When It Comes to Customer Experience in 2018, Can We Make the Boring the New Cool?" And I was calling for kind of like 2018 to be the year where we actually focused on the things that really mattered. And I tried to kind of like invent this kind of hashtag boring is cool. And it never caught on, but I thought it was a nice thing at this hour.
Well, like, it reminds me of a thing that that Paul Greenberg, the CRM analyst, used to always say, which is, we too often we would talk about things like delighting customers.
Mm-hmm.
And his point was customers actually most of the time don't need to be delighted.
Mm-hmm.
They just want things to be easy.
Yeah. And is that what you were meaning by about it's the boring use of AI that will help?
Well, in some cases it's the boring but I also think that where we're seeing some real power for this is to help organizations drive and change their thinking around what it means to be easy and what it means to deliver easy customer experiences. So I'll give you an example, and this is something that one, we're going to be talking about at Pega World, but two, people can actually go play with right now and put their hands on and just use and experience. So we've released this tool called Pega Gen AI Blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go to pega.com/blueprint. And, by putting in your email address, you can use it.
Yeah.
But basically what Blueprint does is if you give it a business process area or a business area, so say I need to do customer servicing for the lending area of a bank.
Mm-hmm.
By looking at both a library of some of our best practices, but also using the power of Gen AI, it actually recommends an optimal process for customer service and lending, or the optimal collection of processes for customer service and lending. And the reason I think that's really powerful is, having been in this game for a long time, too often organizations and enterprises are sort of blinded by their own current ways of working.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through like, hey, we want to redesign some of our customer processes and our workflows that impact customers. But too often we still start with like, well, what are the systems we have and how does that lay out and what is the stuff we need to do? And if we're not careful, we design a process that runs in new technology, but actually just mirrors our old broken process.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about Blueprint is it forces you to take a starting point that is optimized and customer in and outcome focused from the beginning.
Right.
Even though you might not actually end up with exactly the process that Blueprint recommended, and you can change it and make tweaks and decide how to configure it to meet your needs. It's forcing you to start at that higher level view. And I think that way of using Gen AI is almost like an innovation partner, a way of sort of imposing and driving some design thinking into enterprises. I think that's how we get to some of those simplified processes and experiences that are actually what customers want.
I think also it feels to me like it holds up an honest mirror, or provides almost like an external kind of benchmark. It's like, this is what great looks like in the market. And then you can go, because most people go like, here's the as is. Let's imagine what the to be is, without necessarily any external reference about what kind of great should look like. So you might like going, so maybe the as or the to be is just like the as is, but a little bit quicker, but it's still rubbish.
Well, and an executive once said to me something that I take with me, and what she said, when you live on the cow path every day, it's really hard to fight your instinct to just repave it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when you ask people who work every day in a particular process to envision the to be, it's really hard to get out of your own head and truly think about that.
Of course,
And
yeah.
by giving you that sort of forced benchmark, it actually can I think push your thinking maybe a little farther beyond where your as is.
Yeah, and I mean, and it might be in a thing where you can look at it and you kind of do draw on it, and then maybe it'll come a point you go, oh, we're actually doing all right, and that sort of thing is, again, it's a pat on the back, and you go like, wow, because how often do people benchmark what they do against the best practice, and then get to the point where we go, we're great at that. Let's acknowledge that we're great at that, but we need to get better at these things.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I think those are the places where, there's an opportunity to use some of this Gen AI stuff, not just to drive some of the productivity improvements around the edges, but actually to use it to kind of force us to rethink some of the long-held assumptions we have in our enterprise.
Yeah, no, because I've seen other people that have used different types of technology. I mean, new technology, and some of the in the orchestration space, and in the orchestration space in particular. And one of the challenges I found when speaking to people is they're going, I love the idea, but I have no idea where to start. Yeah. And the people that have found the success in those sort of spaces have gone, actually, based on kind of the work that we've been doing with our kind of clients, here's some templates of quick ways to get started. And I think that's essentially what you're doing is you're saying, actually, let's leverage what we know with explicitly about what works, what doesn't work, and let's kind of like expose that to allow people to kind of really understand what's the power of this and where you can go with it.
Exactly right.
Perfect. So, what I wanted to understand, because again, it's that sort of you're taking a very practical approach to this, but the thing about Pega is that you also work with many organizations that operate in highly regulated industries. So like they have to get it right. And so that makes it very, very important that you do the right things for the right reasons and things when it comes to implementing this type of technology. So, and within all of that, there's still this risk that which is a diminishing risk, but around all the kind of the controls that you can put in place and guardrails and stuff. I mean, what sort of things should organizations be doing to make sure that they get the best out of it and make sure it's done safely and correctly?
So I think one of the important things for organizations to do, and this may get a little technical, but I think it's really important to first of all step back and remind ourselves that AI is not one thing. Mm-hmm. It's not this massive like blob of stuff, right? So, if you read some of the business media, and certainly if you read the mainstream media, AI is this massive thing that's either going to save the world or destroy the world, and there's not a lot of nuance in the middle. Whereas in reality, AI is a bunch of different technologies, mm-hmm. many of which have been around for 30 years or more.
Yeah.
Some of which are very new and very groundbreaking, and we don't completely understand how they work, right? So the way I look at it, and the way I've sort of divided it mentally, is there is left brain AI and there is right brain AI. Okay. So left brain AI is analytical, mm-hmm. right? It makes decisions. It basically is statistical AI that mm-hmm. looks at data, finds patterns, makes predictions based on that data.
Yeah.
And there are forms of statistical AI that regulated industries have been using for decades.
Yeah.
To predict business behavior, to recommend next best actions to clients. Frankly, you think about insurance actuarial tables are just big statistical models that we use to predict risk, right?
Exactly.
And those kinds of left brain AI, one, you can generally train them on your own data. So you mm-hmm. don't have to worry about somebody else's pre-trained expectations coming in. You can, if you use certain types of models, you can have them be very, very explainable, right? So we have large banks who use these kinds of predictive models to recommend credit risk ratings. Well, guess what? If you're going to decide whether or not you want to give somebody a loan, you better be able to explain how you made that decision, both to the individual, but also to your regulator.
Right.
And we have the ability to have very explainable algorithms where I can tell you exactly what I looked at. And by the way, we have ability to test those algorithms for bias, because even if I don't put gender into the algorithm itself, I may actually create a model that tracks against gender, and I want to be able to test that and prevent that from happening before I bring it into production use.
Sure.
So these left brain AI tools, I think there are ways in which we know how to use them. So when we talk about next best action, right, and predicting the right conversation to have with a customer, that's generally using left-brained AI. And it can be done in a way that is safe, is customer-centric, adheres to ethics and transparency.
Yeah.
Then there's right-brained AI. And right-brained AI is this generative AI that creates things and makes things and creates new content, like the stuff that's come out from OpenAI with Sora, which, where with a couple lines of text, it will actually generate video.
Yeah.
It's astounding, right? But we should know some things about generative AI. We actually don't get any explainability from generative AI. It doesn't know where that comes from. Also, most enterprises don't actually have enough data and content to train a generative AI model on their own. So they're not going to build their own Gen AI models or large language models. They're going to buy a large language model from Google or Microsoft or OpenAI or Azure, or they're going to take an open source model, like Llama, available from some of the open source libraries like Hugging Face, and deploy those.
Yeah.
And I think with those models, you need to treat them differently. And you need to think about, okay, I don't know as much and have as much control into the transparency and bias, et cetera. But even there are emerging techniques. Without going too deep into tech, there are techniques like retrieval augmented generation, which some people often Google if you want to. That, like, we've got a product called Knowledge Buddy, and if you check out, there's a video called How Knowledge Buddy Works, and we talk through like a little bit of this. But it's a way of basically using your own content to restrict what an AI model can actually say and answer. And so there are ways of using those in ways that are safe, but also effective for the business.
Sure.
And I think the thing that I would ask people to do is, before you put in sort of blanket statements about AI, think about the types of AI you're trying to use, the use case you're trying to apply it to, and then you can actually have a pattern that allows you to do it safely for your needs in your organization.
Yeah. I mean, I think 100%. I love the way that you've characterized that in terms of left brain and right brain. And the way I've been thinking about it is that, because I think you're absolutely right, all this talk of AI, and it's almost like everything's getting conflated. And Gen AI seems to be the talk of the town right now, and it's just dominating everything. But actually, there's a plethora of different tools and techniques in that AI toolbox. And Gen AI has been around for a long time in terms of the approach and things. But what's actually improved is the size of the models and the latency and computing power and all these different things, and also creating like an interface which has captured the public's imagination, it feels to me, and hence why it's gone boom. And people have gone, wow, that's crazy. But I keep coming back to this idea that it's like, these are just tools.
That's right.
And techniques. And one of the things that we have to be clear about is, well, what is it you're trying to do? What is it you want to achieve? What is you trying to build and deliver, and why? And only when you get clear on that will you then get a better idea of what sort of tool you'd like to draw from the toolbox, whether that's left brain or right brain.
Well, and what you've kind of landed on there, which I think is really important, and it's frankly true with any technology, which is you always have to go back to the use case. Like, what's the problem I'm trying to start with? The use case, not with the tech. And then based on the use case, you can get to the right technology in order to solve it.
Yeah. And because, let's face it, the one thing that's absolutely guaranteed is that the technology will change.
Yes.
and generally faster than you think.
Absolutely right. Right. And I think, you know, and that's also frankly one of the reasons why, you know, I'm seeing, especially over the last year or so, you know, an increasing realization at the enterprise level and even in some of the regulated industries that the embrace of cloud is becoming more important than ever, because I think in some of these technologies the change is just happening so fast that you only through cloud services and cloud technologies can you actually keep pace of the change. So I think the other thing that organizations and enterprises need to think about is, you know, at what point do they no longer need to be in the business of trying to keep up with the tech? And they actually want to use cloud services to do that. And instead focus on keeping up with how are we using the tech to drive changes into our business.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's fine. And I've seen actually signs in that. I feel like the enterprise and also the enterprise technology sort of space where you're almost seeing brands almost kind of going back to their almost like a core competency model of operation. So like, this is what we're good at. This is kind of what we're going to focus on. And then partnering with the right sort of people, the right sort of vendors to say, you're the experts across this kind of piece. Help us understand how do we realize our vision, because we need to have expertise in technology because we need to know what we're buying and why we're buying it. But actually, we don't need to build a big technology practice sort of capability to be able to do that.
Well, there's a conversation I had once with, so Google uses Pega for a lot of workflow automation. And when we first started talking to Google, I was asking one of their senior engineers, and I kind of said, you know, because we often talk to, you know, organizations that aren't Google, and they're often debated between, you know, do we want to use Pega for this or do we just build something ourselves? The engineer from Google, like, well, you know, you're Google. Why don't you just build this yourself?
Yeah.
And they basically said, well, but customer decisioning and workflow is not our core competency.
There you go.
Our core competency is search, ads, network power, cloud computing.
Yeah.
So we want to focus on our core competency and bring in people to help us with the things that we need to support that and complement.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's brilliant. Yeah, it's a great example from one of the biggest technology companies in the world who goes, not our bag. You can come and help us do that.
That's right.
So, and we talked, you alluded to it a little bit earlier when you talked about the pace of change has been somewhat mind blowing, and you mentioned Sora and how it can spin up video in a flash. Now there's the new feature being released from OpenAI. But can you give me your view on the future, or what you think the future looks like for businesses, and kind of like what are going to be the implications for things like jobs, productivity, customer and employee experience? I mean, I know it's hard to predict given that it's all these kind of different vectors going and shooting in different directions right now and all sorts of pressures, but have a go, Don.
So again, I think there's a category of this stuff that is basically going to be like Excel. Okay. Right? Like, it's going to be a tool we have. It's going to be an expected competency, right? Like you wouldn't hire anybody who worked at a business without the understanding that, like, hey, you can use Excel to put some formulas together and make some calculations, right? It would be like, yeah, I would expect that you know how to use Gen AI to drive basic levels of productivity, summarization, content creation, etc. Like, there's going to be a category of it which is that, and then there's going to be the category of stuff where I think is, again, how can I use this as an innovation partner that drives real change?
Right.
Because I think there's this real interesting opportunity to, and I've already started to play with this myself, to use Gen AI almost as like a crazy creative, smart colleague who maybe sometimes says really weird things, but will often challenge your expectations and get you thinking in different directions. And you certainly want to take everything they say with a grain of salt, right? But boy, it's good to have that innovation partner, that creative partner that you can go to. And I think that there are places where we're going to find that Gen AI does that and operates not just as a productivity enhancer, which, by the way, will be great, but also as a tool to help pull and push our thinking in new directions.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I love the kind of the angle, which is that there's a productivity, but there's an innovation sort of bit, and I think that's a great way to think about it. So, what are you looking forward to at Pega World kind of most?
I mean, so obviously the most thing that to me the most exciting part of Pega World is spending time with some of our clients and learning things that our clients are doing, right? Because they're coming up with new innovations, and every time I go to Pega World, I meet a couple clients who are doing something new and innovative with Pega that I never was aware of, never thought of before, and it's that to me, those moments are some of the most exciting. Yeah. Like when people get to that sense of pride and ownership that people have when they're showing you something they did that's really been kind of game changing for their business, and your tool has been a little bit of the help in what's allowed them to do that, right? Yeah. So those are the moments that I probably look forward to most. Obviously, I love listening to clients as we show some of our new technology. I love hearing their questions, and they often push us to take some ideas that we have and refine them and think differently. So I think those conversations are also great.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking forward to. Am I right in saying, is it T-Mobile and Booking.com are speaking?
Yeah, we have T-Mobile, we have Booking.com, we have National Australia Bank. Yeah. So a number of really exciting keynotes, all of which I think are doing really interesting things with AI and automation technology.
Yeah, no, because I remember having Stefan Tomke, the Harvard professor, on the podcast a while ago, and he wrote the book Experimentation Sort of Matters, and Booking.com was a core case study in the book and about how they go about kind of doing that. So I'm really interested to hear about what they're doing, because I think that'd be very cool, particularly on how they're experimenting on the kind of Pega platform, but also, well, T-Mobile and also kind of post John Legere and what they're doing with their their kind of their strategy, because they're just like a disruptor in that big telecoms kind of like sort of space, and so it'd be cool to see kind of where they're going with that. So that I'm really looking forward to that.
And what's exciting is we've got their chief digital officer kind of presenting. So I think there's going to be a really interesting kind of conversation. Their chief digital data and AI officer. Sorry. So and Grant's been driving some of their development around AI, not just with Pega, but over in general. And I think that'll be really, really cool.
Fantastic. So, really looking forward to that. So people should definitely check it out. It's Pega World, taking place in June between June 9th and 11th at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. If you can make it along, you should definitely come.
Definitely join us there. It'll be well worth your while. We're actually doing a money back guarantee. So if people come to Pega World and do not feel like it was worth the 2.5 days, we will refund their registration and even a portion of their travel. So that's how sort of committed and confident we are in the value of the content we're putting out. So,
well, there you go, kind of, folks. You heard it here. That there's a money back guarantee on a conference. I'm not really sure I've ever heard a money back guarantee on a conference before this, so that's pretty cool. So before we can ask you some quick fire questions just to wrap up, Don. Anything else you'd like to add or highlight that we've missed out?
No, I think we covered a lot, and I think there's a lot. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to cover, but I'm happy to talk to people further about that, either on LinkedIn or ideally at Pega World.
Fantastic. So, a few quick fire questions before we finish up. Now, I think I might have started this kind of last year with yourself, but what I've been asking people to do is to boil all this down and think about what would be your best advice to somebody listening in that wants to improve their customer or employee experience. But actually, how I've been framing it is to get them to complete this sentence. And the sentence goes, if you want to improve your customer or employee experience, Don Schuerman says, do this, ... in brackets, complete that sentence.
I think take a deep look at the workflows and processes that actually deliver those experiences. And check out Gen AI Blueprint as a really quick and easy way to maybe shift some of your thinking.
That's perfect. I think that's going to definitely going to be a place I'm going to be playing around with, just going, how do you do this? Tell me how to do
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, check it out.
Let's design this.
It's really kind of brain expanding in terms of what it can show you.
Awesome. And secondly, now just for a punk question, because we're on the Punk CX podcast, let me reframe it ever so slightly. What company or brand have you recently seen that's excited you because they're taking a bit more of a punk approach to customer experience, or really taking an experienced leadership position?
So here's an interesting one. I want to shout out the Australian Customs, because I recently got back from a trip to Asia and Australia, and my entire time through Australia Customs was about 45 seconds to a minute. So, I applied for the visa online. I got the visa. I showed up. I scanned my passport. They did a little bit of facial recognition. I walked through and I was done. I wasn't in line, right? And so we talk about making customer experiences boring. This is a great example of that, it was boring. I was through, it was done. And I, got to go on with the rest of my journey. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it was a great example of, here's how we can use some of this digital technology to actually streamline and make the experience better for, the tens of thousands of millions of people who have to come through customs. So,
nice. Great example. Yeah, I've had that similar experience every now and again, and you get through so quickly, and then you sort of look back and go, did I make a mistake? That was really easy.
Isn't there more?
It's like, surely not like, oh, okay, carry on.
Yeah.
And one last thing I've been asking people to do is to tell me a good news story, because the world is full of bad news stories and doom scrolling and stuff right now. So have you got a good news story that you'd like to share with me?
Yeah. So my good news story is, I've been loving, we just wrapped up the collegiate basketball tournaments here in the US.
Okay.
And there's a woman, Caitlin Clark, who has just busted through all of the records for college basketball players ever. Not women's, all college basketball players ever.
Okay.
And more people watched the women's championship this year than watched the men's. And I think it's just I think it's really kind of exciting to see, and hopefully we can maintain some of that momentum of increased equality and excitement on something as, fun as college basketball. But I do think it was just really fun to see more and more people tuning in to watch the women's game.
Fantastic. What a great story. Fantastic. Fair play to them.
Yeah.
So Don, that's all I have for right now. What I will say is, it's always a pleasure talking to you. It's always a pleasure getting your perspective. I look forward to catching up in Pega World.
I look forward to seeing you in Vegas.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.